And now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll proceed with the keynote address. May we now invite Ms. Ruma Balasubramanian, Managing Director, Southeast Asia Google Cloud, to deliver the keynote speech on navigating the supply chain digital transformation. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Ms. Balasubramanian, please, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much to the Senior Minister of State for those inspiring comments today. It is wonderful to see Singapore, as always, leading at the forefront in the maritime industry. My name is Ruma Balasubramanian, and I have the privilege of looking after the Google Cloud business across Southeast Asia, based here in Singapore, for the past 15 years. I'm truly excited and inspired to be here today to talk with all of you about digital transformation inside the supply chain, and particularly as it applies to the maritime industry. And I especially want to thank the Singapore Maritime Ports Authority for the opportunity to share some of the insights that we've been able to glean across the industry in the past several years as we've been navigating together some of the changes that have been happening. Now, I want to split my comments into three sections. The first is a little bit obvious. It's going to be about how this is an amazing time to be in the maritime industry. And I want to share with you a few reasons why. The second is to really think about the inflection point and look at our key stakeholders and their changing needs. And the third piece is to talk about technology, because technology and digital transformation is really at the core of how we capture the opportunities that have been presented to us. As we were speaking earlier today, never let a good crisis go to waste. And this is an amazing opportunity to embrace technology and ensure that it's at the forefront of the strategy inside the marine industry. So first of all, again, I'm going to start with an obvious statement. There's no better time to be in the maritime and maritime technology industries. And I'll share a few reasons about why I personally believe this is true. Very simply put, maritime and maritime tech is absolutely the backbone for economic development and globalization. At the end of the day, it's really who we are in terms of our lifestyles, whether it's the tables that you're sitting at, the chairs that you're sitting on, or perhaps the video screens that you're watching us on virtually. At the end of the day, marine technology and the maritime industry are really at the heart of all of it. In fact, 80% of international trade happens via sea today. And what that amounts to is over 11 billion tons of goods that have been transported each year by sea. So it's truly an industry to be part of. Now, the other interesting part about this industry is that it's increasingly playing a prominent role in today's digital revolution. Now, much like at the turn of the 20th century, the maritime industry was at the heart of the Industrial Revolution. Today, it's really at the heart of the digital revolution. And what's really interesting is that so many people are now paying attention. Now, I want to talk about three key stakeholders. The first is public sector, the second is large enterprises, and the third, very, very interestingly, is the venture capitalists. And each of these areas of the ecosystem have really been taking notice of advancements in this industry. And let's talk about the amazing support that the public sector has provided, not just here in Singapore, but across the world. Now, you heard the Senior Minister of State today talk about some of these developments, and I'll touch on just a few of them. Here in Singapore, we have Enterprise Singapore and the IMDA's Logistics Industry Digital Roadmap. And it's interesting because it's not just about a digital roadmap to embrace large companies, it's actually about a roadmap to assess the capability and maturity of small businesses that are an absolutely integral part of the industry. The second that you heard about was the Singapore Trade Data Exchange, to protect around cybersecurity and really define those information flows so that at the end of the day, when cybersecurity attacks hit, and they will hit, the industry can be prepared to really take those on. And then the final piece is a consortium that's being led by A-STAR around the Coastal Sustainability Alliance. They've drawn a line in the sand to basically talk about a 50% reduction in vessel carbon emissions by 2030. You also heard yesterday about the amazing developments over at our Tuas port, really putting, again, a stake in the ground around building out that port as a truly autonomous operation. And, by the way, creating over 1,000 jobs in Singapore, in addition to the incredible investment that's being made inside the ecosystem. So governments are taking notice, and it's really, really exciting. But very interesting, large enterprises are also taking notice. And again, I've got 3 examples that you might have heard about. Rolls-Royce, we all know who they are. You know, they are a major global provider of shipbuilding services. They're a major systems integrator. And they've been leveraging technology and specifically image recognition to enhance safety. And their image recognition technology is able to identify and track objects and vessels in the environment and that they encounter at sea. So this is a really interesting technology that's actually built right into their ships. The second example, and a company that we work very closely with, is Adani Ports. Of course, this is the largest ports company in India, 13 ports across 8 maritime states. And what they have committed to is better decision-making through one of the fastest SAP cloud migrations that unifies a number of their data sets. So better and faster decision-making. Now, what's really interesting is that they have committed to move 250 applications to the cloud. And mind you, this is a ports company. The third example I want to share with you, and again, a company that we work very closely with, is the Indonesia Ports Corporation. And they're very interesting because they've gone digital all the way from a customer experience perspective. They've actually built out a digital platform that their customers can avail of. This is an e-services platform so that if you're a customer of the port, you can actually go in and understand what your invoices are. You can go in and pay those invoices and understand where your ships are as well. So it's a really interesting application that is really coming to the forefront from a customer experience perspective. So we've talked about public sector, and we've talked about large corporations. And at the end of the day, you might be sitting here saying, well, this is all very obvious. But one area that I think is really, really special is this area around venture capital investment. And the analogy that I would give you is, we all know that Singapore has been at the forefront of fintech development and fintech investment. Back in 2010, there was about $9 billion of global VC investment in fintech. If you spin that forward 3 years to 2013, that number went from $9 billion to $19 billion. And now, just in 2021, the number skyrocketed to $210 billion. And I personally see the same trajectory for MarineTech. Last year, there was an astounding $11.3 billion in funding in 2021 in MarineTech, and that doubled from the previous year. So we're seeing this trajectory very, very similar to the fintech space. We have the privilege of working with a company called Project 44. It is a startup that actually focuses on supply chain visibility. And fundamentally, they have actually been able to secure something like $420 million in VC funding just in January alone. So incredible developments around the venture capital space. And when you know the bankers are interested in your industry, you've got something really, really special. So again, we've talked about public sector and government attention. We've talked about the attention of large companies. And now we've also talked about the incredible investments that venture capitalists are actually making in MarineTech. And what all this leads us to believe is that the rate of digital technology adoption in the maritime sector is accelerating. In fact, it's 3 years ahead of where it's supposed to be. So you might be asking yourselves, what is the next step? You know, you've heard about some of the developments, some of the partnerships that have been at the forefront. But the question you might be asking yourself is, what can I do in my organization? And to answer that question, I'm going to talk a little bit about stakeholders and 3 specific kinds of things that they're looking for. In the first instance, your customers are expecting exceptional customer experience. Now, I gave you the example of the Indonesia Ports Authority and the really great app that they have. But guess what? It's not just about the app. It's about going from really servicing demand to how you can actually predict that demand and help them meet the demand. And that's what customers are expecting today. It's a really, really high bar, and if you're not prepared to achieve that bar, you're going to lose customers. The second area is around building out resilient and sustainable supply chains. Well, now that means a lot of different things, but in my world, what it means is how do you use data more effectively? Whether it's geospatial data, whether it's data about your customers, whether it's data about your partners, or perhaps even your employees, so that you can bring the best to bear around building out that resiliency and sustainability. And then the final piece is around autonomous supply chain operations. And very simply put, what that means is doing more with less. Because at the end of the day, we've all got a P&L to run, and you're only going to be successful if you're able to capture the opportunity while still doing it efficiently. And technology can be a great leverage point for that. So if we think about these 3 stakeholder priorities, you might be wondering, well, what are some of the key digital technologies that a company might bring to bear? And it doesn't matter whether you're a company that's a ports authority, perhaps a shipping container company, or perhaps another company that's a clear participant in the ecosystem. And what we have actually thought about is really, in order to define those technologies, we have to understand what the challenges are. Because at the end of the day, we can build out the digital apps, we can, talk about meeting demand, but to be honest, there's some significant challenges that exist. COVID-19, beyond the incredible effect of the pandemic for this particular industry, it's been at the core of e-commerce. But there's been an incredible imbalance between supply and demand, and that's had a real impact around the overall supply chain, and all of you are at the heart of really solving for that. The second thing is that there's numerous evolving regulatory demands, whether it's changes in tariffs, whether it's changes in routes, in shipping routes, or whether perhaps it's changes in cybersecurity regulations that frankly are changing at an absolutely blistering speed, not just here in Singapore, but across the world. And the third piece, of course, is the effects of climate change and really understanding what that means in terms of net zero carbon emissions and ensuring that you've got the latest technology available so that your countries can really meet their climate change objectives, their climate objectives. So those are some of the problems that have resulted in tremendous complexity in the overall ecosystem. And what's really interesting is that the ecosystem was actually quite fragile to begin with. So when I talk to customers, they point out 3 big problems that exist today in terms of solving stakeholder issues. The first is limited visibility, the second is limited flexibility, and the third is limited intelligence. And I want to talk about these 3 things just for a minute. Limited visibility is all about how you leverage data. Now, for most of you, if you were to go online in whatever system you've got in your companies, you're going to see massive, massive stores of data. And by the way, they're going to be in completely disparate places. So the question is, how do you bring the power of that data together to really create visibility across the end-to-end supply chain? The second area is around limited flexibility. Now, our environment is changing very, very rapidly. Your customers are expecting different kinds of business models. And those business models are probably taxing your business processes, and they're taxing your technology. So that flexibility has to happen in order for you to meet the business model demands of your customer base. And the final piece is limited intelligence. And this is, again, how do you think about using the power of AI and ML around every single part of your supply chain in order to make better decisions and get product to your customers faster. So these are the three problems that my customers are telling me across every single aspect of the supply chain. So the question is, how do we solve for this? And the only way to solve for it that I know about is that we've got to work towards a common vision. So it's up to all of us to be able to reimagine our supply chains for a complex and interdependent world. And complex and interdependent are really complicated words because it means that you're not just working alone, you're part of a much, much bigger ecosystem. And so when we think about the core technologies that are key to really solving these issues, what our customers have done is really focus on 4 areas. The first area is around building digital twins. Now, we've all heard about this term around digital twins. It's a really sort of techie term, I suppose. But the way to think about it in the context of the marine industry is that you want to really build out the environment that you're focused on. And the reason that you want to do that is so that you can make better and faster decisions. Now, there's all sorts of data associated with your environment. We've talked about some of it already. You've got customer data, you've got partner data, you've got geospatial data, you've got data about the weather. And at the end of the day, you want to build out that environment so that you can really do what-if scenarios in business modeling and ensure that you've got, when the time comes, that you've got the right set of scenarios so that you can have that planning in place. The second area is embedding AI throughout. Now, this is not just sort of, putting your existing algorithms into place and, putting it on a different server, right? This is much, much more specific. It's about taking a look at every single business process that you have in your environment, and by the way, in your partners' environments, and ensuring that you are embedding AI throughout that entire ecosystem. Now, many companies are doing this today, and I'm going to share a couple of examples with you in a couple of minutes. The third area is around focusing on the end user, and this is really about your own employees. The state minister talked about attracting younger people into this industry, and I'm telling you, it is easy to do. Because at the end of the day, when you put data in the hands of your employees, they feel empowered. They feel empowered to serve customers and to serve partners. And with that kind of empowerment, comes an amazing ecosystem of young talent. Now, what's even more interesting is that when you can extend that data capability into things like productivity tools, because when you combine data with productivity, that's when you can really get the most from your employees. And then the final piece is around embracing partners. And this is what Singapore does so well. Really creating partnerships and coalitions and collaborations across multiple pieces of the value chain. So what I want to do is to share with you a couple of examples to really bring this to life. And the first one that the senior state minister talked about was a partnership that we're really proud of with Ocean Network Express. Now, you know this company as the 6th largest cargo shipping container company globally. They're based here in Singapore, and we've partnered with them now for many, many years. We signed a recent agreement with them to really help them build out an AI center of excellence. And you might wonder why we did this. The reason we did this is that they have been amazing about putting certain pilot projects into place. And I'm going to talk about a couple of these right now. The first thing they've done is that they have a virtual assistant that's been now integrated with their productivity and collaboration tools. I talked about sort of putting the power of data into the hands of employees. Well, ONE actually has done that. They've actually done it, and we're also privileged to have them as a Google Workspace customer. And so what they've done is integrated that data and the AI capabilities into Google Workspace as a productivity function. The second thing they've done is they've leveraged machine learning to organize customer engagement history. So all of the details around customer engagements, whether it's the minutia of customer transactions or perhaps even fielding customer phone calls, has been put into ML models. And that's really powerful because that means that they can really better serve their customers. And then the final piece is that they're leveraging predictive capabilities in order to streamline their overall operations, whether it's predictive maintenance or perhaps predictions around changing shipping routes. So this is an amazing partnership and one that really leverages the 4 capabilities that I talked about earlier. Now, what's also interesting is that there are other players in adjacent industries that are really making technology their own, and we should be really excited about stealing from them. And I'll share a couple of those examples with you as well. Another global customer of ours, UPS, they're leveraging data, particularly location data, and really building out their intelligence around it. Very important, of course, for their fleet. They're also committing to $400 million in cost savings, not just from their IT department, but also in their overall operations. And then the final piece is that they're actually committing very, very seriously to their ESG goals by reducing fuel consumption by something like 10 million gallons of gas per year. So that's an amazing, amazing success story as well that we're, again, very, very excited to be working with them on. And then the final example that I'll share with you is MarineTech. Again, they are a global customer of ours, and they're responsible for monitoring the whereabouts of vessels and the movement and tracking of freight across the globe. So these are a couple of examples of how companies that we're working with have really put these capabilities to good use. And so in conclusion, what I'd like you to do is to really think about how you can reimagine your supply chain for a complex, interdependent world. The technology is available. The support is available from a public sector, large enterprise, and now even a venture capital perspective. There's so much excitement to be working in this industry, and I hope you'll take this opportunity to leverage all of the technology resources available to you to drive transformation and really take advantage of the opportunities ahead. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I wish you a wonderful conference.
Thank you very much, Ms. Balasubramanian. Thank you.